Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and there's always a lot of talk about behind-the-scenes influence of Dominic Cummings in the affairs of state, for which there will be more to come this week, no doubt. But in this video, what I want to discuss is how Chancellor Rishi Sunak is flexing his political muscles and arguably calling some of the shots. The Mail on Sunday are even reporting that Sunak is overruling the Prime Minister now. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, when the former Chancellor, Sajid Javid, an experienced operator at the top of government for many years, was replaced by an almost complete unknown in Rishi Sunak, it was believed that Johnson had appointed someone who would be unshakably loyal. There were several other candidates who have been loyal to Johnson that he could have appointed and might have expected to be appointed. But no, he went for fairly rank outsider Sunak. The first the public really saw of this man is when he stood in for Boris Johnson during some of last year's general election debates, you know, when the Prime Minister was far too busy to attend them himself, inspecting the interiors of fridges. But it was a risky move as well from Johnson because, unlike some others in cabinet positions, the role of Chancellor is supposed to be fairly stable. You know, if you have a bit of... You're not supposed to have a massive turnover of staff in cabinet anyway. It can look like shaky leadership. But a bit of a revolving door with a few positions is okay. Chancellor, you don't really replace your Chancellor. And so whoever he appointed would have a lot of power. I mean, the role of Chancellor brings with it a lot of power anyway, because they decide the budgets for all of the government departments. And budgets are control, of course. But Johnson couldn't just get rid of Sunak if he didn't like what he was up to, because he's already got rid of one Chancellor. And since Boris Johnson's fall from grace this year as well, Sunak's star has been rising. He is now by far the most popular cabinet minister, in the estimation of Conservative Party members. And last week, he outdid his boss in a media charm offensive. All things considered, the Chancellor has made a huge mess of things recently and really should be under fire. But he won plaudits, rightly so, for the furlough scheme. That was fine. We all supported that. But he was refusing to extend it. Now, this was always an untenable situation. The amount of unemployment that would result from this, political suicide. So just like a lot of other government ministers, many of his cabinet colleagues, he was always going to have to U-turn on this. And U-turn he did last week with a weaker copy of Germany's Kurzarbeit system. But the right-wing media were extremely kind to him. This is a Chancellor who has finally had to heed the warnings that opposition parties have been screaming for months. And he's torn up a recent budget to pay for it all. His plans are in chaos. His autumn plans have completely evaporated. And not even down to anything that couldn't or wasn't predicted. That's the thing. An absolute failure. Clear failure. And yet, he's been billed as a hero in the right-wing press. As someone stepping up and taking the tough decisions. And this isn't just approval for what the government as a collective has done. Because Boris Johnson has not been getting the same positive press for his role in it. Because after all, he is the Prime Minister. He has the power to yay or nay any plans of the Chancellor. Rishi Sunak could not have announced that scheme last week without Boris Johnson's approval. So really, Johnson should also be tied to the scheme and should have also been getting that praise in the press. No, he has not. You know, reading the parts of the media that bat for the Conservatives, which is most of it, and about to be even more, praise was reserved for Rishi Sunak. It was still criticism of Boris Johnson for the situation we're in. Now, much of the right-wing media have been turning against Johnson for a while, it has to be said. But much as with his MPs, he won't be dumped until they feel that they've got someone to get behind. After all, it's all right saying, well, the leader we've got now is a load of rubbish. But if you get rid of them, you've got to put someone else in. Who have we really got? Michael Gove? Behave yourself. So it seems that the media are getting ready to get behind Rishi Sunak here. And what really seemed to seal the deal from the Mail on Sunday yesterday was the story that it was Rishi Sunak who stopped the 2-week national lockdown. Because here's the thing. The media have been very critical of the government's COVID response. Of course they have. It's been undeniably awful. Even Johnson's most ardent supporters can only say in defence of him that, well, nobody else would have done a better job, despite the obvious evidence to the contrary in other countries. But if we had a government that had made the right calls on COVID, those same media would have criticised them too. They hate the COVID restrictions. They will only be happy with a government that suppresses the virus without doing anything at all, without any measures whatsoever. So of course they would have exploded at the prospect of another national lockdown, just as they did over the first. And we know that the chief medical officer was calling for a 2-week lockdown to allow test and trace some respite to catch up. Obviously this did not happen. They just made pubs and restaurants close at 10 p.m. instead, because, you know, that's a compromise. Ironically, of course, in many areas they've just made the situation worse because city centres are packed with street parties at 10 p.m. I already mentioned the situation in London, which is now happening every night. It's now a thing that you get kicked out at 10, you go to the offie, buy yourself some tins and have a street party. That's what's happening there now. And I've seen pictures now of this happening in Liverpool as well. But the Mail on Sunday reported that Boris Johnson had been persuaded to apply the lockdown. That, you know, Professor Whitty had actually convinced Boris Johnson that we needed the 2-week lockdown and he was about to go ahead with it, and that it was Rishi Sunak who refused to go along with it. He said, no, I'm not going to support that. We're not doing that. Now, let's be clear here. We do not know if this is true. The author of the piece, well-known scumbag Dan Hodges, might have been told this, and he might genuinely believe it, but his source could have been lying. Especially if that source was close to Sunak, who is clearly aligning himself as Johnson's successor right now. It's also possible that Hodges just made it up himself. Journalistic integrity, not exactly his strong point. And if it had been concocted, whether by the source or the author of the piece, then the motivation is fairly obvious. Push the idea that MPs do not have to put up with Johnson for fear of there being nobody better to take over. They are ready to support Sunak. The party is ready to support Sunak. They're the wider membership. That's what they're saying. Get rid of Johnson. Get Rishi Sunak in. There will now be extra emphasis as well as a poll that has been widely circulated. Not, I have to say, from one of the polling companies that I would say is top draw. But still, you know, a lot of these things, it's about perception. There is a major poll going around which now shows that Labour have not so much caught the Conservatives as overtaken them. The Conservatives are now polling behind Labour, according to one polling group. And if the story in the Mail is true, then it's also giving MPs the idea that, well, Rishi Sunak is of the same mind as you. He's the one who stopped this. You'd have gone mental if Boris Johnson had imposed this 2-week national lockdown. You've got Rishi Sunak to thank for stopping that. As Prime Minister, he'd never go along with any of that nonsense. This is, of course, why MPs are planning on clipping Johnson's wings later this week to stop him just announcing restrictions without any consideration for what they think. Not that we should take this turn of events as necessarily a good thing in itself. It's a necessary thing, and if it's going to happen, the sooner it happens, the better. Yes, we want Boris Johnson gone. More specifically, we want Dominic Cummings gone. But we will also need to prepare ourselves that he will be replaced by someone just as callous and propelled by a media that does not have our interests at heart. Because that Mail on Sunday report, for example, was not painting Boris Johnson as the villain for maybe going ahead with this 2-week lockdown. No, they were just painting him as a weak leader. They were painting the scientific advisors as the villain, as the threat. Because this is what these people are. They are anti-intellectual, anti-scientific, anti-reality, black magic peddlers. But as I've said before, the sooner Boris Johnson is gone, the sooner Labour and other opposition politicians can start working on the new Conservative leader, who will be their actual opponent in the next election. There was never any chance of Johnson running the next campaign, and so attacks on him only really serve one practical purpose: get rid of him as soon as possible to reveal the real opponent so that they can work on those with the maximum amount of time left before the next election. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, Please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.